Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back, everyone, and thank you, Laura. Welcome. Laura Burges is a lay entrusted Buddhist teacher in the SotoZen tradition. She lectures and leads retreats at different practice centers in Northern California. A teacher of children for over 30 years, she trains other teachers to bring mindfulness practice into elementary classrooms. Laura co-founded the Sangha and Recovery program at Zen Center and has a particular interest in the intersection of Buddhism and recovery. She is the abiding teacher at the Lenox House Meditation Group in Oakland. So welcome, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm sure, like me, you'd prefer for all of us to be able to meet together in your beautiful meditation hall. But I'm very grateful that we have this alternate way to get together. And so welcome to everyone. We're all dealing with the strange times we're in. Most of us have had to withdraw from some of the people and activities that we love in order to protect ourselves and others. And I think this time presents many challenges to us as practitioners and as human beings, and also some wonderful opportunities. And I hope that you'll find helpful some of the thoughts I'd like to share with you today. One of my earliest impressions of Zen Buddhism was an article I saw in a magazine about Japanese ceramics. And it talked about the practice of kintsugi. Kintsugi. Now, the syllable kin means golden, and the syllable tsugi means joinery. In other words, to join with gold. Some of you may be familiar with this. It's an ethic developed in Japanese culture over many centuries, where the potter, if he or she breaks a teacup, for example, gathers up the pieces of the broken pot or bowl and then carefully refashions it, putting it back together using lacquer infused with gold. So rather than disguising or hiding the cracks in this broken pot or teacup, the cracks themselves are illuminated with gold. This practice of kintsugi is part of the ideal of wabi sabi. I love that Japanese expression, wabi sabi. And that's an appreciation of objects that are simple, unpretentious, and aged, especially having a rustic or weathered quality. In our youth-oriented society where people and things tend to be discarded when they're slightly bruised, I think wabi-sabi is a wonderful reminder of the preciousness of worn but still useful people and things. And of course, in Japan, they might designate an ancient potter as a national treasure. There's more of a tendency, I think, in Japanese culture to revere and honor the wisdom of age. There's a story about this ideal of wabi-sabi that I'd like to share with you. Sen no Rikyu was traveling through southern Japan and was invited to dinner by a host who wanted to impress him with this elaborate antique jar that he had prominently displayed in his home. Rikyu, the Zen master, though, didn't seem to even notice this jar, and instead was looking out the window and commenting on a branch beautifully swaying in the breeze. Frustrated, his host broke the jar and went to bed. But his guests gathered up the fragments and joined them together using kintsugi. When Rikyu returned on another visit and saw the repaired jar with the veins of gold highlighting the broken places, he exclaimed, Now, this is magnificent. He was looking at those lines of gold in the broken pottery and how that mistake or that error had been highlighted, just the way our own mistakes and faults can come to the fore. In his song Anthem, Leonard Cohen says, "Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." All of us are slightly cracked. maybe especially right now, our cracks are showing as we're under the duress of shutdown. All of us have places in us that are broken. And sometimes we forget that these very places where we're broken, this broken heart that we carry with us through years of living, can be the place where we can connect with other people. A couple of examples, if we've suffered a terrible grief, we're uniquely suited to reach out and help others who are grieving. And if we've suffered a great loss, we can comfort those who've also lost. If we've had or been through some kind of life-changing trauma, we can help those who are experiencing the same thing. And those of us in recovery have found that we can reach out a hand to someone still suffering and use the suffering that we created and endured as an addicted person can help someone else step into the lifeboat of recovery. If we turn around and face our own life and move towards healing, these places in us that are broken can glow with a kind of golden thread, like a teacup or pot that's been repaired through kintsugi. Sometimes, in fact, if we think about it, it's our flaws, our mistakes, our misdeeds, our unskillful actions that make us accessible and lovable. And yet we often try to hide those things or apologize for them or sweep them under the rug or keep them secret because we think we're supposed to be moving ever upwards towards a kind of perfection. It took me a long time in my Buddhist practice to recognize that we don't sit in order to achieve perfection or even to become a better version of ourselves. Rather, we sit in order to deeply plumb the depths of who we actually are. It's said in Buddhism that we don't sit with a gaining idea. And yet, the paradox is that by sitting still, as we do, morning after morning, year after year, we become very intimate with ourselves and with the cracks in our being that we've accrued through living. With all our flaws and cracks, and also those places that are seamed with gold. Part of this knowing ourselves is waking up to the way that we treat other people. And, we're in a time now of isolation, although some of us might be living more closely than ever with the people we share our lives with. And it's very important for us to apprehend the ways in which we might be pushing other people away rather than allowing them to come closer to us. And I do think, I said there might be opportunities in this time of shutdown. One of them is a chance to retreat from the world and review our own behavior and our own habitual patterns. I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways in which we might push other people away without even being aware of it. Sometimes we carry damage within us. Well, I would say let's say we all carry damage within us. Cracks in our surface that might push others away when what we're really longing for is intimacy. Some of us during this time of shutdown are spending more time alone than we really want to, and it's very difficult. Some of us may be enjoying this solitude. I know some people who are feeling isolated and depressed, and others who are spending more time than ever with their families. Many of you know that I teach kids, and I just retired after teaching for 35 years. And I spent the last few months of my teaching kids online. And some of those kids said they were so happy to have this time with their family. Meanwhile, their families confided in me that they were going crazy. But they never appreciated me so much as a teacher as when they had to spend all day long with their kids. But this forced togetherness in a household can bring a time of conflict and irritation and strife. And I think what I'd like to speak to you about today is something that can serve us in good stead when we come out of shutdown and once more are in connection with more people again. I recently came into contact with the work of John Gottman, PhD, and his teachings have been embraced by this wonderful project at UC Berkeley called The Greater Good. And they really have done a lot of research into mindfulness and meditation and the value of those things. He's done a lot of research on what constitutes a healthy marriage or partnership. And this thinking that came out of this project is aimed at healthy love relationships. But in looking deeper, I think you'll find these principles can apply to any relationship. The relationship you have with your friends, with children, with your family of origin, the relationship you have with people you work with, or even within your own Sangha. These are 4 ways of being, which are very human. We all indulge in these things. But they're things that tend to destroy intimacy rather than creating it. You know, in Buddhism, we talk about afflictive emotions or afflictive behaviors. These are things that we do that cause suffering to ourselves and others. And if we were awakened to the effect of these things, we probably wouldn't do them. But often the things I'm about to talk about are ways that we've protected ourselves in the past, ways that we've armored ourselves. And these 4 ways that are delineated by Dr. Gottman are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and withdrawal. So again, these 4 things are criticism, contempt, withdrawing, and defensiveness. So let's talk first about criticism, because it's probably impossible to have an intimate relationship with someone or a working relationship with someone or a family relationship unless we're able to find a way to bring up and deal with conflict. I know in my family of origin, wow, anything but talk about it. I mean, you were really encouraged to stuff those feelings and put on a happy face. This is something I had to learn to do as an adult. But in order for each person to feel listened to and to get their needs met, there should be a kind of trust and freedom to air complaints and concerns. But I think we'll look at how this must be done in a skillful way, a way of open-hearted compassion rather than, claws out. So when this becomes a problem is where there's a tendency to criticize our friend or partner or family member in a global way, making broad negative judgments or proclamations about their character or personality, rather than dealing with a very particular and discrete complaint or issue. Now, you'll know you might be doing this if you find yourself using words like always or never, because most of us never do anything always or never. I want to make this really tangible. If you say you never think of anyone but yourself to someone you're in relationship with, you're probably not telling the whole truth. Really? You never think of anyone but yourself? And at the same time, you're putting the other person in the position of defending their very being. So an alternative to this is that when making a complaint, it's probably best to focus on our own feelings and to share the effect my friend or partner's actions have on me. So, for example, if I say to my partner, I feel lonely when you come home late for dinner, this will be so much easier for that person to imbibe rather than saying, you're so selfish and inconsiderate. I'm sure you can see the difference. When we approach conflict or difficulty with love and with a genuine curiosity about the other person's feelings, we have a very different outcome. And so in this conflict, when we maybe bring up to our partner that they're always late, it's a good time for active listening, inviting the other person to share their own feelings and experience with us. And in order to demonstrate active listening or hearing, we can engage in active listening. And so I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. It can sound a little forced or self-conscious at first until you get used to it. But you paraphrase what the other person tells you and then put it in your own words without embellishing to make sure you get what the other person is saying. You know, there might be a very good reason why they're late. And it might be something buried in their childhood. So asking appropriate questions and expressing empathy in a natural way, using engaged body language, you know, rather than leaning back with our arms folded when the other person is sharing their truth with us, but leaning forward with an open expression on our face. These are things that soften the ground for better communication and intimacy. And when the other person is sharing their truth with us, it's so important to avoid judgment, to not interrupt, to not give advice, and then to take turns. So once you've really listened and heard the other person's concern, you can share your point of view with them. And I think you can see how this changes the nature of our communication with the people we love or care for, or even the people we have to be with because we work with them, you know, even if we'd rather be somewhere else. So that's criticism, a skillful way of dealing with criticism. The second one I think is so important, and it's an area that's often very unconscious in us, which is contempt. And this is communicated in many ways: tone of voice, body language. It's treating others with disrespect through our tone of voice, the way we respond to them, that we may not even know that we're communicating disgust or ridicule. Sarcasm is a tool of contempt, mockery, eye rolling, sneering, name calling. And again, these might be defenses that we developed during our life to protect ourselves. Actually, we're very hurt, and yet we're being sarcastic or mocking. In a long-term relationship, a friendship or work relationship, contempt can be generated by a tendency to focus on the negative, to focus on the qualities in the other person that we don't like, and let them rise to the top. By hanging on to small resentments and letting them fester and bubble up in us, we tend to respond in an inappropriate way at an inappropriate time. The antidote to this is to constantly remind ourselves of things we like and appreciate about the other person. And if you feel like you're getting into a contemptuous mode, you could take a break and come back to this. What am I grateful about this relationship? What is the other person? How have they been there for me when I needed them to be? How did we become friends in the first place? What do you value about this person? And if we can touch those things within ourselves, we can reconnect with the other person without contempt. and yet with a deep intention to convey our own truth to them. Because often these are things we need to say, but can we say them without contempt? The third one is defensiveness. And for some of us, when we're criticized, even in a skillful way, it can be easy to go into a defensive mode. Rather than taking our own part in a conflict, we can lash out to defend ourselves, or start here's a good one, enumerating past hurts or wrongs the other person might have, we feel have done to us. And this can include listing grievances long past, When we respond in this all too understandable way, the other person doesn't feel heard or understood or honored or valued or respected. So again, an alternative to this kind of defensiveness is just to take time and reflect on what the other person is saying. Another time for active listening. And for us to take responsibility if it's appropriate. I brought up something with my partner the other day, and I was all ready to defend myself, and I did speak in a loving way, and he just said, "I'm sorry." I was so surprised. He just said, "I'm sorry," and then we were able to talk about it more. Rather than getting defensive, to just, "Wow, I see what you're talking about. I'm sorry." And an apology can go a long way to healing a conflict. The fourth stance we tend to make in intimate relationships or work relationships is withdrawing. And this is sometimes called stonewalling, shutting down, retreating, emotionally distancing as a way to protect ourselves, giving someone the silent treatment, leaving an argument or leaving the house without saying where you're going or when you'll be back. And all of these passive-aggressive stances make the other person feel abandoned and rejected. And maybe they feel abandoned and rejected in the way we have felt in our lives. And this is an unconscious way we're repeating that pattern. An alternate to withdrawing is to say that you're interested in hearing what the other person needs to say, but that you need a little time. And you might go into another place for a short time, take some deep breaths, agree on another time to talk, and return to the conversation when you're ready. And if you feel you aren't able to engage in a positive interaction right now, just to say when you feel you might be ready to talk. And this is a way that you can communicate that you're taking care of yourself and being thoughtful, rather than rejecting the other person. And this is so important, that part of this whole idea is to take care of yourself and speak your own truth. And at the same time, drawing a wider circle of compassion around you and the other person. I think that we can really transform our relationship to ourselves and other people if we're careful about expressing contempt, criticizing harshly, if we're careful about being defensive, and about withdrawing from the other person when we're hurt, and become more aware of the subtle ways we inflict hurt on those we care about, often without meaning to, but just by responding in some habitual and unskillful way. When I was little, if I was supposed to meet my mom somewhere, this would be like when I was a teenager, she'd always say to me, "Be sure to be on time, because it's better for you to wait for me than for me to wait for you." And she said this to me many, many times. And it wasn't until late in my adulthood when I noticed that I was often late when I would go to visit my mom. And I think this was an unconscious response to those years of being told that my time was not as important as hers, And once I really understood that, oh, this pattern of mine of always being late is this unconscious way of taking my own power. And I'm a grown-up now, and I don't have to do this anymore. And then it became a real practice for me to try to be on time. Actually, someone said to me, it's hard to be on time, but it's easy to be early. You know, I would always try to be there right at the right time. But to be there a little bit early is an easier practice, and it's a lot more relaxing. So let's treasure the cracked and mended bowls that we all are, and let us shine with those golden threads of practice. I want to share one of my favorite poems with you by Mary Oliver. I really love trees and the teachings that trees offer to us. And if you think about trees, they just grow where they're planted. They take what they need from the environment around them and give back so much. They give back oxygen and medicine and food, shelter for animals, shade for us. And I often feel trees are our best teacher. And in this time of shutdown, to walk under trees is so refreshing, and a reminder that this too shall pass and we can still be a part of the natural world. So I'd like to share this poem with you by Mary Oliver called When I Am Among Trees. When I am among trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say they save me, and daily. I'm so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and call out, stay a while. The light flows from their branches, and they call again. It's simple, they say, and you too have come into this world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. Thank you very much for your kind attention. And I hope we have a way of sharing some thoughts from you. If we could have some time for discussion, is that possible?
Yeah, that sounds great. We have another 20 minutes or so.
So I'd love to hear your whatever might have come up for you during this talk from your own experience or your own practice. Francis, are you raising your hand?
No, I'm petting my cat.
Oh.
But thank you. I've enjoyed what you've shared. I think it's quite true and quite valid.
Thank you, Francis. Thomas.
Good morning. Thank you so much. I'm always glad when you come visit us.
Oh, thank you.
I love your sense of humor. I really love that quote about to be on time can be difficult, but it's much easier to be early. That's so true. So I'm going to try that. My question is, so I do understand the value, when disagreeing with someone or perhaps criticizing, to make it about our own feelings. Like when this happens, I feel this way. And I see and I've experienced how well that works between two people. We're in this cycle right now of, the political cycle. Let's just call it that. And I see so much, so many discussions that are, the other side, they always do this or they're always about that. my question is, I wonder, what are your thoughts on how effective it might be or not to perhaps frame something like, when our president says this, it makes me feel like he doesn't care about, whatever. I don't know if that would actually elicit a different response from somebody who may not share my views. Do you have any thoughts about that, Laura?
Thomas, this is a huge question, and I think we're all flailing about trying to figure out how to respond to this very surreal time we're in. And I have to admit that sometimes I'm going to out myself as a Democrat. I feel like the Democrats are just way too nice sometimes, I feel often, where's the outrage? Yeah. And I do feel like we can speak with our bodies. It was so encouraging to me to see, I'm at risk for COVID, so I don't go out much, but to see people taking to the streets in this way that I haven't seen in a long time. Of course, there was some violence, but for the most part, it was peaceful demonstrations. And of course, in our democracy, we do have the power of the vote, and we can do that. I was thinking, should I write a postcard to Donald Trump every day objecting to children being held at the border, separated from their families? Now, that would make me feel like I was doing something. I'm sure it would fall on deaf ears. So this is a question, it's such a profound question that we all have to take up, is what is the appropriate response to injustice? And I think one thing that's very heartening to me recently is to feel like, hey, I'm not the only person who feels this outrage. Look at the millions of people around the world who are expressing this in the streets. And, I think we just have to do the best we can and have faith that there's a wonderful quote. It's often attributed to Martin Luther King. Actually, it was someone else he was quoting who said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but eventually it bends towards justice. And Thomas, maybe that's the best we can hope for. Suzuki Roshi, who founded the San Francisco Zen Center, said in response to this feeling of the overwhelming call of the world for us to do something, he said, shine one corner of the world. In other words, choose something you can have a voice in and do that thing. Now, we might not feel like we're doing much when we sit down and meditate, but we don't just meditate and we don't seek peace and happiness just for ourselves, but for the whole world. And looking at your faces and having met with you before, I know many of you do work in your community to shine your corner of the world. And maybe that's a positive response that we can have at such a difficult time. And I think, Thomas, your question is a koan that we'll keep asking ourselves. Is that helpful?
Koans are always, helpful if you use them right. So
okay.
It's a good way to look at it.
Thank you. I see Tom's little blue hand. Tom?
I've got two blue hands.
Oh.
And they're very busy at work lately with an organization called Vote Forward. It's the little step I can take in feeling empowered, or the illusion of empowerment through all this. And we're writing somewhat handwritten letters to people who are inconsistent in their voting patterns, though mostly Democratic. And it's new for me, but I'm bringing some of my own Zen practice. I'm in southern Arizona, so I've been particularly sensitive to the responsibility, I guess. And but Lori, I enjoyed your talk about Wabi Sabi. It was something I was first introduced to by Alan Watts in The Art of Zen. I think that he wrote way back in the 60s or 70s. And just the fact that we didn't have in our language that aesthetic description and appreciation of old and aged and weathered. And, our MO has always been to, well, if it's peeling paint, then paint it or scrape it off and stay busy changing it. And so I appreciate you bringing that up too. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Hi, this is Bob.
Bob?
I very much appreciated what you were saying. In the beginning of your talk, I was starkly or dramatically reminded of social work principles that I think mostly unconsciously I used when I was working as a social worker. It's always easy to sit with someone else, listen, and then offer opening suggestions on how to expand the discussion so that it's useful for them. I sometimes in those days used to come to myself as a client and offer myself that kind of opening question and listen to myself. And I found being my own social worker was often very helpful. And in having those memories, I've been fully retired for the last 5 years and retired as a full-time social worker closer to 15. I realize I haven't done that with myself lately. I haven't come to myself as a client and try to listen to myself with an open mind and an open heart and offer that kind of advice that I was able to give to others. And thank you, because I'm hoping I remember that and can do that, because there's so much now that is so stressful, whether it's the virus, whether it's politics, whether it's the effects of all those things. So thank you. I really enjoyed and appreciated your talk today.
Thank you. You're so welcome. John E.
Hi, Laura. Thank you so much for the talk. And I don't know why I forget about Wabi Sabi and that practice, but it's always so heartening to be reminded of it. I think because I grew up in this culture and it's not really rooted in this culture and in my history. But I mean, what I'm finding, I'm not in a partnership. I'm definitely in a lot of friendships. And what I'm finding, especially in this time of shutting down and being restricted, is the things that you mentioned, the criticism, contempt, withdrawal, and defensiveness I'm sitting with in my own head. And that's, to me, it's really hard to have compassion when I'm sitting with that part of myself, and to just embrace it and experience it as brokenness, and not to be like criticizing my criticism. So it's just something that came up when, for me, it wasn't so much for me about interactions as about sitting with myself and that process of self-examination, where I have get caught in relation to myself in those 4 different ways.
Thank you so much for that, John. I think that until we are able to be accepting of ourselves and compassionate towards ourselves, we don't have that to offer to other people. And I think some of us are finding it very challenging to spend more time alone. And yet it is a time to really work on ourselves and look at ourselves in an honest way, but also to be kind to ourselves and take care of ourselves. I think during this time, we all have our antenna up about increased mental illness in our communities and domestic violence. And that's a danger when we're cut off from the social interaction that we all thrive on and very much need. And that's why I'm so grateful for this kind of format for us to be able to use to stay in touch with each other. I think we have time for another person or two if you'd like to jump in.
Hi, I'm Cass.
Hi, Cass.
And I guess I was thinking that maybe the Western version of the Japanese practice with the gold and the crack is crackpots, and I think like embracing our crackpotness is maybe something worth pursuing. I think in the solitude that we've been experiencing lately, it's been easy for that to sort of come to the fore. It's like without trying to constantly fit into kind of social situations, you can kind of find out who you are and try to manifest that, and maybe value it a little more than trying to lubricate the social situations all the time.
Yeah. It's a great time to be your own best friend right now.
Yeah. So thank you for your talk.
You're very welcome, Cass. Thank you. Yes. Jeff.
Hi. Thank you for a great talk. I'm reminded of in this shelter-in-place time, being alone so much. Occasionally I remember the 12-step phrase, when I'm alone, I'm with a crazy person. And like Cass said, it's part of the practice to really be able to become big enough to just embrace all of it. And Zoom is a great help to be connected. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, this is the time we usually start to wrap up, but does anyone else have another comment before we start with announcements? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Laura. We really appreciate it. I'm going to put into I put into the chat box the link to recordings of past talks, and Laura's in there again too. And we have the link to either use PayPal or a credit card to make dana contributions, or you can mail a check to the GBF post office box. And just a reminder that your dana, your donations help us with teacher honorariums, with our work with our sending a newsletter to incarcerated Buddhists. When we're up and running with that pre-COVID, we're working with Larkin to do dinners, and there are many, many services that we provide in our community. So your generosity helps us reach out to others. So whatever you can contribute, you take a minute now to click on the link and donate. Any other announcements?
I have a recommendation. Thanks, Laura. Always such a delight to have you. I just finished this week a book that is called The Great Fire by Shirley Hazzard, Hazzard, about people in the aftermath of World War II. The Great Fire referred to World War II, the utter disruption and the death, and how to rebuild a life. But it's also a great witness to kindness. Anyway, The Great Fire, I highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Jeff?
On Wednesday nights, we have another GBF meeting from 7:30 to 9. It's a half-hour meditation and then an hour-long discussion group. You're welcome to attend part or all of it, and just come as you are.
Greg here. I just wanted to mention that the suggested donation, if people are able, is $10 to $15 for the dana.
I'll also throw in there that during, I keep track of the mail for GBF, and we get many requests from incarcerated Buddhists, gay Buddhists, for pen pals. So if you have an interest in corresponding with someone, sharing your practice, sharing your friendship, with someone who's incarcerated, please reach out to me. And in some cases, they can even correspond through email. So if your handwriting is not your thing, then you can also do email if the particular prisoner has access. I will repost in the box next week's teacher, who is Donald Rothberg, practicing insight meditation since 1976 and has received training in Tibetan Dzogchen and you guys have to help me with this one, Mahamudra practice, the Hakomi approach to body-based psychotherapy and trauma work. He regularly teaches insight and loving kindness meditation and on transforming the judgmental mind, mindful communication, and wise speech, working skillfully with conflict and socially engaged Buddhism. He is the author of The Engaged Spiritual Life, a Buddhist approach to transforming ourselves and the world. Next week. Any other final announcements before we close? Okay, Laura, we have a dedication of merit, but if you have one that you'd like to use, get open to that too.
Oh, sure. We offer the merit of our practice to all beings in the 10 directions, past, present, and future. May all who are struggling with the ravages of this disease and from the illness in our society move towards health, happiness, and recovery. May all beings be happy. May they be joyous and live in safety. May all of us be happy. May we be joyous and live in safety. May it be so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Zoom applause.
See you next time.
Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Grisha.
Bye, Grisha.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Laura.
Very pleasant.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.